Howdy, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Okayest Trapper podcast. As always, we are brought to you by Mountain Tough Fitness. Go to mountaintough.com and check out some of the new programming available, including the new over 50, Matt, just saying, backcountry program that was piloted by a previous guest of mine, Randy Newberg. If you want to, use the promo code OKS30, all caps, to get a free 30-day trial. Now, my guests, that's plural, today is a few people that I've been extremely excited to talk to and are special to me, not just because our main guest was the one who reached out to me about my book really proactively over a year ago and allowed me on his podcast, but he's also somebody that's extremely involved in the trapping world. He's a U.S. Army Special Forces veteran, works at USPS, owns Epler Fur Company, runs the Skook Trappers and Pennsylvania Youth Trapping Contest on Facebook. That's a lot. I'd like to welcome Matt Brophy and his son, Robert, to the podcast. Welcome, guys.
How are you doing, guys?
Hello.
Oh, man, this is exciting. And Robert, thanks for hopping on too. But this is exciting for me. This is the first time I've had a father-son duo on the show. So yay for that. So I wanted to start by asking each of you what your first memory of trapping is. And Matt, since you're the oldest, I'm going to let you answer that first. And then, Robert, I want to hear what your first memory of trapping is. So, Matt, what is your first memory of ever being exposed to or being on a trap line?
Well, I was probably about 8 years old, and I lived in a semi-rural area. I mean, we had sidewalks and streets, but I found a couple of number one, I believe there were Oneida Victor jump traps in our basement that I'm sure my grandfather or somebody had for something. And I stole some wire out of my dad's basement and wired them to a dead log up on this rock bank behind my house. And, stole the sardines out of the house and set them. And then a couple of days later, I connected with my first animal, and it was a skunk. So, of course, I was excited. I wasn't old enough to carry a firearm or anything yet, so I ran home and got one of my neighbors who was a little bit older than me by about 2 years only, and he came up, and we dispatched it. In the course of it, we got doused with the spray, but I was that excited we couldn't smell it. And I knew in our area, like when the guys would go out hunting, they would hang their deer in the yard and off the trees. So, of course, I had to hang my skunk off the tree so everybody in the neighborhood would see. But that didn't turn out too well with my mom and dad. But that's what started it. And it never, besides my time in the military when I couldn't do it because of being deployed and stuff, that it never stopped that desire to trap.
That's absolutely a great story. I'm sure your mom,
she still brings it up.
So did you have a solution though, like for getting the scent off? Did your mom like try the tomato soup? Like,
oh yeah.
What was the course of action after you guys dispatched and finally got back in the house, or did you sleep outside for a few days?
No, I was able to sleep in the house, but they just had to roll with it. My dad was a hunter and fished, but nobody trapped but me. So they just, they always supported me, and they took me out. Like when I got a little bit bigger, my dad would drive me around to help me set and check the traps, but they always supported me.
That's amazing. Now, Robert, I know you're sitting next to your dad, but do you remember the first time you remember being exposed to trapping?
Yeah, it was, I don't know how old, like about 5, 6.
Yeah, and you're 13 now, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, cool. So about 5 or 6. Keep going.
Yeah. And then it was Christmas, and my dad was talking about this trapping thing, and I thought it sounded cool because I really liked animals. And we go out and we start setting, and there's this old kind of ruined playground close to where Dad lives, and we set a box trap there. And a couple of days later, we caught this big raccoon in it.
Too cool.
And
You remember what you thought about when you first walked up to that box trap and saw that raccoon in there? Was it exciting? Was it scary? What was the feelings?
it was just awesome.
And then what'd y'all do afterwards?
After we caught the raccoon, what was your feeling afterwards?
I was just happy, and it just started to make me like trapping a lot more.
Cool. And so you've been trapping ever since then, right? So ever since you were 5 or 6 and caught that first raccoon, you've been out with your dad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Have you caught anything else other than raccoons in the past few years?
Yeah, we've caught red fox. We caught the bobcat up here.
And for those who are just listening, I have to say, Matt and Robert have a beautifully taxidermied bobcat sitting right above them that they had trapped before. So you've done red fox, bobcat,
raccoons, skunks, possums,
Beaver.
Yep.
So what is your favorite? What is your favorite critter that you've been able to trap with your with your dad, Robert?
Probably the bobcat. That was just so exciting.
Okay, so I have to ask then. We got to hear the story of the bobcat. So when was it? I see both of you smiling too. So how did you guys get a hold of that beautiful bobcat?
Well, how about I start, Robin?
Yeah,
you can finish it up. So I actually get Robert every other Christmas. Christmas, he lives with his mother out in Washington State, out in Oak Harbor, out in the Sound. So I make sure every year I do a lot of good. The years I know I'm going to have him, I really let some areas go before the season. And Pennsylvania has a short bobcat season. It's only 3 weeks, and you're only allowed one. So I had some areas that I had seen the sign and stuff. So we set it for bobcat and fisher. And it was the day after Christmas, and it was a Saturday. So I was worried there'd be a lot of people out riding their quads and side by side. So we actually checked the first half of the line. We reversed the line. And that day we caught, I think 2 possums and a red fox.
Yeah.
So then we came over to the side, which I knew would have less traffic. And we pulled up to the first set. And I could tell I use a lot of drags because of the soil conditions. And I could tell there was something big jumping around in the trap. And then you could finish it off, Rob. We
walked up, and Dad at first thought it was like a coyote because he just saw this big thing running around in a 10-foot drag. And we walk up closer, and we see that it's a big cat. And I told my dad beforehand, I was like, "Hey, Dad, if we catch a fish or a bobcat, can we get it full body mounted?" And Dad said, "Okay, we'll see. It's hard to get those, but we can see." And we caught the cat.
That's awesome. Yeah. And for those listening, your dad followed through on that promise though, because you guys got that cat, and there is a great looking taxidermy right behind you guys. How much did that cat weigh? It looks at least like a 30-pound cat.
It was 30 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how was that from, speaking to you, Robert, like seeing a cat at the end of a 10-foot drag, was that like the highlight of your trapping career so far, of walking up on this beautiful looking cat on the end of a long chain?
Yeah. It every time I go out trapping with my dad, it's a highlight of trapping. But this was just so cool. It was my first time seeing a bobcat, not in a zoo.
Yeah, and you guys caught it. If you don't mind me asking too, like with that short season in Pennsylvania for bobcat and fisher, it sounds like it was on a foothold, but did you guys have any kind of special setup? Did you know there were bobcat in the area? Was it a blind set? Like, you remember what it was?
Yeah, we knew there were cats in the area. It's I live in a big coal mining area, so there's a lot of spill banks and rock banks. So there's a lot of big rocks, and then the Mother Nature takes over the rock banks, and it gets very thick underbrush. So there's a lot of rabbits, a lot of prey for the cats. That bank in particular, I've probably caught a half a dozen off either during season or before or after. So we knew they were there. And one of my go-to sets that I like to use specifically for cats is I'll find a rock like the size of a volleyball,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just smear. I use a lot of Marciato's Bobcat Gland Lure from Mike Marciato, and then Autumn Addiction from Sawmill Creek Baits and Lures, and then I'll give a squirt of my buddy Bill Morgan has a Bobcat Pro squeezing just on top. Because I watched house cats, how a house cat will rub the corner of a sofa or the corner of a chair to mark its territory. It's essentially just a rub set for the cat. And then I'll put 2 traps on each side of it on a drag. I used to use a lot of flagging, but a lot of times the only thing that would attract would be people who want to steal my traps. We can't use any live, like no wings or no fur for flagging in Pennsylvania. It has to be artificial. So everybody would use the CDs or Christmas tree garland. That stands out for people who are out. That's during our muzzleloader season too. And last 2 years ago, I had over 7 traps stolen in a 3-day period.
So I got to ask about that though. So the rub set's interesting. I do want to come back to that, but before this was not a question I had kind of pre-filtered, but it's one that I hear a lot, especially from my brothers back on the East Coast, is trap stealing. And to hear that you had 7 traps stolen over a 3-day period, I'd love to hear like how often that happens, like what you think the cause of it is. Is it like an anti-trapper? Is it other trappers? Is it, what's causing that? Because fortunately for me, where I'm at, like I'm the only trapper and I'm so far in the back country, unless someone stumbled on it, they're not finding it. Tell me a little bit about that.
With here, it's people who are deer hunting and stumble onto it. I kind of had I could say we've probably since buried the hatchet, but I had a guy who lived close by who was kind of, I won't say a rival, but he didn't like me hunting in his area and vice versa. So I finally had to kind of, be the bigger person and, approach him. I'm not saying he did it, but he was the only person that I knew was up there all the time. Since I approached him and kind of buried the hatchet, whatever, I really haven't had that problem in the last couple of years. I mean, the last year or two. That was probably 3 years ago I had a trap stolen.
And
so like,
so I was gonna say, but like with like the garland, the artificial, like using a CD, especially on Bobcat sets, that's just kind of like a literal flag for saying, hey, there's traps that are set here. And if somebody had ill intent, it kind of points it out for them.
But I actually found a way to use something that it came upon me accidentally. We were out driving deer one time in PA because I hunt with a group of guys and we do a lot of drives. And something caught my eye, and here it was one of those Mylar balloons, like the shiny metallic balloons they have at birthday parties. It was just wrapped around a bush. I guess somebody had it at a party, and it got away. And then when it finally lost its helium, it just got tangled in a bush. And then I noticed I would see those quite often up in the bush. So that's what I use now. And since I've started using those balloons, I've had no problems. Because it's something that the people out there hunters see, they're used to seeing it as compared to Christmas tree garland or a CD hanging on fishing line.
Yeah. I don't know if that says a good thing or a bad thing about how people are used to having trash out in the woods, but it totally makes sense.
And that's one thing I really like when we take our sets down, like I tell all that stuff comes back with us. Like I just don't, we don't stick it under a rock or whatever. We take it back with us because you could reuse them too.
Yep, that's the way to be. Now, Matt, I know you mentioned you started trapping when you were 8, and I have a question here. I'm going to ask it, even though you somewhat answered it. Is you've been trapping your whole life, save for that time in the Army. I was going to ask, were you able to do any trapping while you were active duty? And I know you were in for quite some time. And, did you evangelize trapping to other Army buddies and people in the military? Did you get any chance, or was it just a dry period for you?
It was pretty much a dry period. Occasionally, when I would come home for Christmas breaks, I'd throw maybe a half a dozen traps out. Nothing extravagant. When I was in Special Forces, most of the guys that I was in there with had outdoor backgrounds. So we always talked hunting, fishing, trapping. There was quite a few guys still to this day that are big trappers I was in the Army with.
Awesome.
So of course we'd sit around and tell lies, and that's even to this day. A few of the guys I call up if I come across a problem or they do, we help each other out.
Awesome. And so it's a bummer, right? Were you in North Carolina or were you in Georgia during that time?
I went to North Carolina for training I went to selection there, and then I did they call it the Q course and language school in Fort Bragg. And then I actually got stationed in Washington State at Fort Lewis.
Okay. Well, it's a bummer you didn't get to trap out there, huh?
They actually banned it for a few years when I was out there. Now, as the way I understand it, it's back now, but you have to use box traps, and it's very stringent. Yeah.
So what year was that? Because I did have Jason Phelps from Washington State up there, and I think it was mid-90s when they had that strong push and had a ban and then reverted back to cage traps only.
Yeah, I was there probably from 90 to 2000 when I got out.
Yeah,
in that time frame. I mean, it's a beautiful state. Robert still lives there. I mean, the hunting is great. 3 kinds of deer, 2 kinds of elk, bear, cat, specialty tags for goats, sheep, and moose. But I didn't have much of a chance to trap out there, and I was gone 8-9 months out of the year.
Well, I think you might have been a busy fella there, but so one thing I did want to ask about was, you got 2 dogs that you got running around who I know are kind of descendants from Paul Anzac's dogs. So shout out to Paul. You mentioned you use your dogs on your lines. Like, can you kind of explain a little bit about what and how you leverage dogs on your trap lines?
Well, I'll take them out before the season when I'm scouting. They're only a little over a year old now, so they're still a little wild out there. But I would take note wherever I would park my side-by-side, just go through a walk through some of the reclaimed mine lands with them on their I keep them on a leash so they don't go flying out of there if they get onto a deer or something. But I would note wherever they would have to do their business at, I would just mark that spot with a piece of surveyor ribbon or something or whatever. And I would set those when the season came, because obviously something did their business there before. And also with the recovery of animals on drags this year, I had a drag. I usually try to pre-wrap them, but whatever the reason was that ripped the drag, I had a buried skunk set, and the one drag was completely gone. And it was a fairly open field, and I walked and I couldn't see anything, and both of the dogs are in the side-by-side going nuts. So I put them on their collars, I'm sorry, on their leashes. And I remember I even said to them, all right, let's see what you guys could do. They literally drug me across the field to this big sticker bush. And one actually went around the front of it, and one got behind it. And then I was looking inside and I could see the chain. And there was a coyote wrapped up in the sticker bush. I mean, I'd like to think eventually I would have found it by myself, but they definitely, cut the time by far. And it was crazy because they've never really been trained for that kind of stuff, officially. But one knew to get in front of it and one knew to get behind it. And one would agitate, to get its attention, and they were able to, and the coyote, people think, oh, the coyote got agitated. The coyote settled right down. The coyote knew it had been beat, so to speak.
Man, that I can only think about so many different scenarios where that is extremely helpful, both from just an ethical perspective to find your quarry quickly, but also just from the figuring out where to put your sets too, and also leads to ethical catches because you're going to be getting the critters you want when they're coming by.
And I know one of your fellow Montanians, Josh Jurek.
Mm-hmm.
His two dogs he takes out in the trap line are actually my two dogs. They're all from the same litter. His dog's Smoke and Trapper, so I know he uses them quite a bit too. And I watch him and follow him and see what he does.
Awesome. Yeah, that's the best way to learn. Now, Skook Trappers. Can you help explain the origin of that group and all the involvement there? Because that's how you and I first were able to connect.
It all kind of started as a joke. I'd be going to work, and I'd have pictures on my phone of my catches, and I'd show the guys, because I hear all the time, and it's kind of funny. Like you hear people say, "Oh, I used to trap." Like to me, that's saying like, well, I used to breathe. I still do. Like, why'd you get away from it? And I understand, family, job, commitment, all that, but even I have all that stuff too. But like, I've always found time to do it. Maybe not to the extent I want to, but even just a little line. So all day long, I was just sending pictures of these people, and they're like, "Oh, my buddy wants to see the coyote. My buddy never seen it." And the one guy at work said, "Why don't you just start a Facebook page and just post the pictures on there? And then, you just say, oh, just look on the page and they'll join." I said, "Oh, okay." And then I couldn't figure out what I wanted to name the page. And we live in Schuylkill County in Pennsylvania. So like our slang for people living here are called skooks because we have like a distinct accent and we have words that they don't use anywhere else but here. And it kind of I remember having my first 30 people join, and I was like so excited because I was like, oh my God, I got 30 people watching this. And then it just took off. Like people from other states and some of the bigger name people in the trapping industry joined, like Adrian Ramirez, Mike and Linda White. And it just kept growing. Now I know I have over 21, almost 2,200 members in 7 countries, and I don't know how many states. But it also developed a lot of friendships locally because I met a lot of local trappers I wouldn't have known before I had Epler Fur, which was good because we have that social networking, and we help each other, and not even just on a trapping standpoint. Like, I need help moving, or one time my transmission in my truck blew up here. One of the members said, "Well, here, I could borrow my wife's car. You can use my truck to get to the shows." So yeah, I will have to say, I mean, all the outdoor people that I deal with, trappers are by far the most generous and helpful. And that's a big thing from when I was a kid during the fur boom, because nobody told you nothing. Like it was like a dark art. Like I finally learned tricks for fox trapping by just for years bugging my one neighbor who was successful, and he finally just broke. I think he just did it just to shut me up.
Man, I agree with you. That I talk to a lot of people because my journey into trapping started just after my journey into hunting, and not to knock the hunting industry and those who are hunting, but they are definitely more closed off to mentorship and advice versus trapping, where truly, and yourself included in this, have been very open to new trappers who genuinely want to learn, to build those relationships and, help each other out. And I think it's part and parcel to most people who trap being very salt of the earth, right? People who understand and have a good connection to the land and their fellow neighbor.
Yeah, I'm not sure when it's coming out, but I wrote an article for Trapping World that they are going to publish about how a lot of people get into trapping. It's a solitary sport, but then you meet these people and they become like your family.
Yeah, 100%. So I got to ask though, Robert, I want to quiz you real quick. So,
oh no, I didn't study.
It's okay. Schuylkill County. So what is a word or vocabulary that someone from Schuylkill County, do you know any of the words your dad's talking about that somebody from that area might say that somebody from, say, Idaho, like myself, might not say?
Yingling.
That's yeah. What else, Matt? Any other words that you can coach us on?
Yeah, like we'll say, instead of saying you guys, we'll say yous. sounds like a female sheep, ewes,
Mhm.
what are ewes up to. A lot of times two guys they'll call each other butt. It's short for buddy, but they'll just say yo butt, you know, so stuff like that. And some of the different coal mine towns, they even have their more distinct dialect or, local words.
Got it.
Or
So
we have even like items here that when I bring people from different states to come stay at my house, like they've never heard of, like pierogies. I don't know, you know what they are?
oh yeah, my
Yeah.
wife's Russian, so I get a little bit
Yeah,
of that
you're good
Eastern
then, yeah.
European.
But yeah, stuff like that, pierogies or boilo.
Don't know that.
Boilo is a drink that the miners, they make it around the holidays. It's usually made with either moonshine or grain alcohol, but it has apple cider and cinnamon and caraway seeds. But it's a big thing in the area. Like they have huge competitions around the holidays, and it's best to serve it warm, like you nuke it in the microwave for a bit. But I usually try to take some of that to the shows because everybody will bring stuff from their area, and it's always a hit.
Man. So listen, anybody going out near Matt in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, get with him so you can learn the lingo so you don't stand out like a
You blend
sore
in.
thumb. Too cool. And then the other thing that I know you're extremely involved in is a Pennsylvania like youth trapping contest. Can you give a little overview of that? And then I've got a few questions for Robert on youth trapping specifically.
Okay. So a good friend of mine, Jake Miller from out in the Pittsburgh area, another individual, we became like brothers, met through trapping through the internet. He approached me and he said, hey, I want to do something with the kids, but you be willing to help me out. And I said, sure. So he said, I want to do a weekly contest that we give prizes to the kids, like traps and lure. And we'll have them put their pictures on Facebook to kind of get them away from the electronic devices and get them outside. So the first year we did it, we had maybe only like 15 or 17 kids that were pretty constant. And every Sunday at 8 p.m., we would take all the kids' names for the week and we'd announce the names and what they caught, put all their names on a wheel on a computer, then it would spin. And then wherever name it stopped at, the first kid's name would be the cover pick for the following week. And then we'd give him a trap and a bait and a lure. It started out that me and Jake we said, we may have to buy like a box or two of DPs or something, but it really took off. So then we were worried like how we were going to like fund this financially between the two of us. But once again, the trappers stepped up. It's all done by donations. Like people will say, I have a dozen of old traps in my garage, or I have, I bought this lure, but I don't trap no more. Do you want it? So it's mainly all by donations. So this year coming up will be the 4th year we're doing it. And last year we averaged about 50 kids a week, and that would be posting stuff. And at first, I think they were misunderstood that you had to have a catch picture. And we understood that, some kids aren't going to catch them, So just anything outdoor related, like out setting traps, checking traps, in the fur shed, like anything, we posted it. And it's kind of neat because now that we're in the 4th year and the kids who were with us in the beginning, we're watching them grow up too. And it's kind of like it's our, when they make catches, me and Jake will say it's almost like we were there. Like we have, like, I love looking at catch. I could look at catch pictures all day long. We got very little rebuttal, believe it or not, like, because no matter what you do, somebody's going to find the wrong in it, I guess. And my buddy Jake came up with the best answer because they said, some of these kids won't even trap or they won't continue trapping to adulthood. And Jake says, well, that's true. And we know that, but at least they'll remember, when they were young, that 2 trappers helped them. And he said, who knows where they're going to wind up in life. He's like, they may be in a point where it will come that, somebody maybe wants to ban trapping and they'll be in on that vote and they can say, well, no, those guys ain't that bad, so.
I think it's great. That's beautiful. And Robert, question for you. I have really young kids who are younger than you, and my kids come out on my trap line. They're a little too young to really understand yet. But for kids around your age who might be interested in trapping, what would you tell somebody of why they should trap?
Yeah.
It's just exciting going out. If you really like animals, you get to see animals up close. The excitement you get when you finally get something. And it also creates good work ethic because you go out every day and check them. No matter rain, no matter whatever temperature it is, you go out and check.
And like I explained to you, we do it to keep the population in check and
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
Yeah, hitting on all those numbers. And then, Robert, I was going to ask, like, I know trapping as an adult is a great way to develop discipline and to develop grit, which is why I love seeing, young men like yourself getting into trapping. What's the hardest thing about trapping in your view, Robert?
Hardest thing about trapping is probably getting into it because some days you want to just sleep in and not check. Some days it's too cold and you want to be in the house warm, but it's just the mental part of it. You just need to go out there and check.
Yeah. You don't have your dad knocking on your door too many times in the morning, do you? Or does he have to come and drag you out of bed sometimes?
Sometimes, but
sounds like you're
I'm up.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a pretty self-motivated young man, which is awesome. Another thing, so this evolution, Matt, that you've had is interesting to me. You started in your youth, you took a break for your professional career and the military, kind of got back into it, started Skook Trappers just from people saying, hey, show me your catch photos, to then being involved with the Pennsylvania Youth Trap Contest, to also owning Epler Fur Company. So, like, when in this puzzle did that become a thing? And then what do you do with Epler?
Well, Epler Fur Company has been in business for 49 years. A friend of mine, John and Linda Epler, owned it. They live about 20 minutes away from me, and I used to buy all my supplies there and sell my furs to him as a kid. And when Skook Trapper got bigger, we started having a Skook Trapper rendezvous, more like just a big barbecue where all the members get together and just, we do a couple little competitions and do a demo or two, but it's not like the full-blown, rendezvous you see, but just kind of get together and kind of bust on each other because, that's what guys do. But I had some prizes I was picking up for the kids, and I just kind of jokingly mentioned to John, I said, John, when you're ready to retire your business, you let me know, I said, because I'm going to start mine. Mm-hmm. And he called me about a week later and he said, were you serious about that? And I said, well, yeah, I'm looking to do something when I retire from the post office. And we just started talking, and I talked it over with my wife, Danielle. And she said, well, if you think you can do it, she was more on board because it was already an established business with the customer base and everything. So our plan was I was going to shadow John for a year and go to the shows and meet all the people and, shake all the hands and kiss all the babies and that kind of stuff. And then COVID happened and all the shows nationwide were canceled. So I waited, and the beginning of January 1st is when I took over the business, and John was there for answer any questions or any concerns I had, but essentially, like, I went in blind. Like, I never owned a business before, never ran a business. It amazed my wife because we would have the one night we had freezing rainstorms here, and I was like, I gotta go down to the garage, I have a guy coming, and she was like, what's he coming for? It's the weather's horrible. He drove like an hour and 15 minutes just to buy waxed dirt. That's when she knew. She was like, you and all your friends are crazy. She said, but whatever. She was like, they come. So she knows I have to go to the shows, and then during the busy time of the season, like, she knows there'll be times I'll be down the garage sometimes till midnight with people. But that's how it started. I just started going to the shows and meeting people, and I kind of think I have like a very open personality, so I'm very comfortable going up and just talking to people, and it just went from there.
And with Epler, so like when you took over the business peak COVID, well, first off, what is involved with Epler? I mean, obviously wax dirt is clearly a product, but what all are you selling and providing through the company?
I sell all trapping supplies. Now, John, when he had the business before me, he bought fur, and he was probably one of the leading authorities on ginseng and sellable municipals in the country, which, I mean, I have his books and stuff that he wrote that I sell, but I'm strictly just trapping supplies. And I have some tan fur that if people want, but nothing. I'm not like one of the bigger furriers like Barnes's fur or Glacier where I just have a little bit.
Awesome. And then that's been so how was that post-COVID? So you started that business, or for all intents and purposes, started it during COVID, and now you're getting to go back to all the shows. Has that been a lot better?
Well, yeah. The first show I did, actually, Rob, my one grandson, my other son, Anthony, and my wife's one nephew. It was in Clearfield, Pennsylvania. And it was the first show I ever did as a vendor. So, of course, I had always been on the other side of the table, so to speak. So when I was setting these booths up and stuff, all the other vendors were kind of looking at me because Epler's been around for so long, everybody knew him. And then when he wasn't there, because nobody really knew I bought the business because he didn't really like publicly announce it or anything. Like they would come up and say, "Oh, when's John getting here?" I'm like, "John doesn't own it no more. I do." So I still remember. I just had a show with this guy the other day. We were laughing about the first show. I probably brought out 80 dozen traps that I had, Duke traps, and had them stacked from number 1s to number 4 in front of the booth, and all the body grippers. And this one guy, Dave Graham from Coon Creek Trappers, who I want to just add real quick. A lot of the vendors at the show are essentially your competition, but they're not because they're still your friends. Like you have to run to the bathroom, get something to eat. They'll hop in your booth and they'll say, "Hey, you sold this and sold that," while they're selling the exact same thing right next to you. And they could easily say, "Hey, I have it over here. That guy's not there." Dave kind of took me under his wing and said, "You're going to hate yourself come Saturday when you're loading those 80 dozen traps back up." And I'm thinking, what does he know? I'm going to sell all these. Well, he knew a lot more than I knew because I think we loaded up about 79 dozen traps. It took hours. Yeah. But the shows are where it's at. I love going to the shows. You meet the people, you meet new people. We see a lot of the people from the youth trapping page will come there because a lot of them we only see on the internet. You get to meet them in person. You see, like I said, some of the people I'm good friends with is Laura, John, and Zach Gidney from New York. I've known Zach now about 4 years, I guess. And just to watch him mature from like a 12, 13-year-old boy to I believe he's 16 now. And he's going around the nation with his mom doing demos at all the big shows. That they're truly a trapping family.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then speaking of shows, you were just it's the FTA rendezvous that you were at in Virginia, right?
Yeah, the FTA in Virginia and Harrisonburg, and then the very following weekend I had one in Hughesville for the Pennsylvania Trappers Association.
What was your biggest takeaway from those two shows? Just with the state of trapping as it is now, does it seem like it's continuing to grow? Is it about the same since you've been doing this for so many years?
I know when I was a kid, like me and all my buddies, everybody had a half dozen traps and we'd all get together and set them. Now, I find owning Eplers, the people that are getting into it, the majority of them I see are men and women who are retiring from their regular job and they have the extra time. They did it as a kid. They want to get back into it. They either sold their stuff or lost it or gave it away. but they're getting into it that way. I've noticed in like a lot of people with the excuse me, with the fur prices being down. Like I know when I was a kid, for an average raccoon, you wouldn't even have to skin it. You would get $15 on the carcass, and back then minimum wage was $3 an hour. So now you wouldn't get $15 for a raccoon on a carcass unless it was the size of a grizzly bear. But people get into it because I believe the trail cams are a big thing, because the people see the bobcats, the coyotes, the fishers on the trail cam. They want to get them. Turkey hunting's big. That's blown up over the last couple decades. People want to get the nest raiders out, so they're buying the DPs for the skunks, the possums, the raccoons. A lot of the fur goes to the novelty market now. Like skunks are one of the biggest items for selling, which like when I was a kid, you almost dreaded catching a skunk because I would just use mine for the bait. Now I know that's probably one of the best animals to get because we draw the essence, we take the fur, I use the meat, I have a market for the skull.
Man, that's amazing. So like, it's growing too. So it leads me to a question. What do you see as the future of trapping?
I firmly believe trapping is always going to be around. That's why us as trappers need to get involved with your state and national agencies, because those men and women are the people that fight for our rights. Traditionally, trappers, like I said, are loners, but those days are over. We have some bickering amongst ourselves. That needs to stop, because that's all the antis and other people want. Do I ever see fur prices going up to what they were like when I was a kid? Honestly, no. I mean, I would love for them to do that. But you always gotta, keep trapping in a positive aspect, because it's funny because when some people say, "Oh, you break the animal's leg" or this, like they're envisioning those traps on Bugs Bunny with the big teeth. Like, and a lot of times when I'll do a demo or show somebody, I'll set like a Duke 550 and stick my hand in it and then wiggle my fingers. And I'll say, you see, like it's just a means to hold the animal. I mean, obviously the body grippers are different, but I like to hope it keeps growing. It's something I'm very passionate about. So like I always, put it out there. I wear fur, as much as we can in the winter. My wife has a red fox parka I had made for her, and she wore it to a wedding this year in the city, and we were a little worried about how that would go, but everybody went crazy. Everybody went crazy over it.
Yeah.
Like they couldn't believe how nice it was. And then they said, "Well, where'd you buy it at?" And she said, "My husband caught the foxes and he had it made." And of course, you get that funny look, like, "What do you mean he caught the foxes?" And then you explain to him, and of course, I always have my phone on me. That gets broken out, and they're amazed. And a lot of the stuff that we catch, if the meat is edible, I have a buddy of mine who makes the best sausage you ever want to eat out of raccoon, Italian sausage. The bobcats we eat, the beaver we eat, there's more to it than just people think.
I think that's key, and that's key in getting that message out across the ethicalness, just the use you get out of all these animals, like renewable fur. And it's funny, like I had the opportunity, like I've been tanning my own furs and making stuff, but I never really felt synthetic fur, but I've been touching nothing but real fur for a long time. And I finally touched synthetic fur, and it's an amazing difference. Like it's mind blowing, but I agree with you that I hope it stays right. And we're on our back foot. Definitely infighting needs to stop, and we need to be all running the same direction. And I think folks like yourself and others are doing a really great job of putting a great foot forward. Just a few more quick questions, like lightning round, so to speak. So, Robert, what is the hardest thing about being in a fur shed? So you've gotten your animal trapped, it's been dispatched, and you're in there, you're going to help your dad with using your knife to, skin out an animal. What was the hardest thing you ever had to learn about skinning a critter? Or are you a master skinner? Because you're probably better than me.
Yeah.
Probably the fleshing.
Yeah.
Is that just the patience or like accidentally putting the hole in the fur, or is it everything?
Probably a mix of everything. Just I'm not that good with knives.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, it takes time and practice. I'm still in the same boat. And then, Matt, for you, what's the biggest mistake you can ever remember making on your trap line?
Setting a trap and thinking there was going to be an animal in it the next day.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people, if you want instant gratification, buy a scratch off, because trapping's not your thing then. It'll definitely teach you patience. And especially when we get the first snowfall, it will definitely humble you, because you'll see all those tracks walking right by your set and thinking, what did I do wrong? And you didn't do anything wrong. Just the animal didn't get interested. I think it was Russ Carmen said, you only catch like 4 out of every 10 animals that walk by your set, because for whatever reason.
Yeah, somebody put it to me in a similar way of like, for me, if I put out 10 traps, my expectation is maybe I'll have 1 catch, which makes me a 10% trapper, which, for most people is a pretty low odds, not sport, but pursuit. And like you said, if you want instant gratification, go buy your scratch off, because it's a slog. And as Robert already said, it's that dedication, that work. It's a hard pursuit, but one that has so much gratification that people who haven't done it are going to have a hard time understanding. So last question, I usually like to end on a hypothetical, and I've got one for Robert. So Robert, you get the last question.
Okay.
I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Would you rather be able to trap for the rest of your life, or have unlimited access to Minecraft, Roblox, or whatever games you like for the next 5 years?
Trapping.
That's what I was hoping for that. I saw you wince a little bit, though. It seemed like it might be a hard thing to pass up, but
If he answered the other way, he'd be out of the will.
Perfect. Well, gentlemen, both of you, thank you for coming on the show. I learned a lot as always. Robert, you are an amazing young man. I love seeing the youth really getting involved. I love seeing and hearing the stories with your dad. Matt, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for being such a nice, genuinely individual to me when we first met. It's folks like you who have made it easy for people like me who've gotten in trapping later in life to, come into this space. So genuinely, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for all you do.
Well, we're working on it. We're trying to keep the legacy going. But where can people find more about Scoop Trappers, Epler Fur, and anything else you've got going on? Where can people donate for Pennsylvania Youth Trap Contest? Give us all the things.
Facebook has Scoop Trappers. It's SKOOK Trappers. You're going to look at the picture of a tailgate full of animals. Another one may come up of Rob with the raccoon and a box trap. That's when I was trying to figure it out and I screwed it up. PA Youth Trapping Contest is just that name on Facebook. And then Epler Fur, you just go to eplerfur.com, or my number is 272-245-0104. I have a little shop. I send out mail order. I'll be at the shows, whatever. I'm more than happy to help anybody. If anybody even has any questions about trapping or whatever, feel free to give me a yell.
Perfect. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. And for everybody listening, we'll catch you on the next episode of the Okayest Trapper podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.